I don't know what type of timeline we're living in.
This is China, baby! Turn up!
But IShowSpeed just did the biggest favor for the Chinese government. I never even thought that I would use IShowSpeed and the Chinese government in one single sentence. But here we are. He solved the problem that Chinese politicians have been battling for long without him even really knowing it. He was all over the news.
IShowSpeed's China tour is going viral.
他是国外最有影响力的网红之一。
Even the Chinese embassy officially tweeted thanking him for his contributions towards fostering better cultural exchange, which is why he was heavily accused of being a Chinese propagandist. And he literally did all this just with a camera, a stream, and a trip to China. The stream was a crazy historical moment. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've definitely seen some clips from the streams. This year was a massive success. Huge engagements, millions of views. I didn't even know that people were watching him in China, but after his China trip, his popularity and his fan base just exploded. Now looking at it first, you might think like, why is this even relevant? It's just another fucking influencer being at a place, barking at random people, doing dumb shit, right? Well, technically yes, but just considering the fact that how many people watch Speed, it is a crazy cultural moment that he went to China and showed some kind of a part of China that is not really in the minds of people abroad. He was able to show a more authentic side of China, and this just allowed a bit more better understanding of the country itself.
This is what China looks like. This is China right here.
He was able to show a much more cooler side of China, like doing kung fu training.
Oh, beautiful.
Oh, fuck!
今天 Speed 学功夫。
And backflipping on the Great Wall.
Great Wall of China!
He's showing off the newest technologies, both on like the EV side, showing off cool EV cars.
Car cost?
Retail is about $70,000.
70,000? And it's faster than my Lamborghini.
Unfortunately, it is.
And it's electric? Oh! Whoa!
Or these new experimental technologies like flying cars.
Holy shit.
He also meets up with these famous Chinese people who are also known abroad, like the LCD sign guy.
What's up, homie Speed? I'm Tony.
What the? Yeah. Okay, Tony Tone.
Yeah, 3 years warranty.
The Super Idol guy.
Super Idol 的笑容都没你的甜，8月中的阳光都没你耀眼。
The actor from Karate Kid, but now he's actually grown up.
With this.
The guy who sounds like Donald Trump, but he's Chinese and never been to America.
Speed, it's my absolute pleasure to have you come to Chongqing.
Even Jackson Wang.
Life is great when peace comes to your heart. A ride to find a place, but you're so too far.
He indulged a little bit more in Chinese culture as well, eating like local food, trying out local stuff.
Fosse is hot pot in Chengdu, China.
For example, eating that roast dog that random uncle was bringing him over and over again throughout his stream. Or like him seeing very cool Sichuan face-changing performance.
Oh! Oh, shit!
And all these things were able to like portray some kind of an extra side of China that is less politicized. But most importantly, he had very wholesome and also quite real interactions with people on the ground.
I miss you!
I love you, bro. I love you.
You brought KFC all the way to the Great Wall of China.
Yeah.
Come here, bro. Just for me.
Yeah.
Actual locals who just living their lives like any of us in other countries. And of course, not only Chinese people watch these streams. Across the world, people were talking about it. People watch these viral clips. And for some people, it really changed their whole entire perception of how China looks like compared to what they have seen in Western media. And the Chinese government loved that.
到底的直播，全景展现一个没有剪辑和滤镜的真实中国。
Which is why came the controversy. A lot of people were calling him out for being a Chinese propaganda pawn.
So IShowSpeed just spent $250,000 for this car in China, and now they're calling it CCP propaganda. How much was he paid? China is buying all the influencers.
So, is this true? Is he actually paid by the CCP? Or is this guy single-handedly dismantling views about China that has been portrayed throughout Western media in the last few decades? Well, just like with anything, it's quite complex. To unpack this, we kind of have to talk about some other things first. Before we continue, I would like to kindly ask if you guys can press that subscribe button. It would mean a lot to me. I'm on the mission to build the best channel possible that is breaking down the bigger picture behind global events that are related to social culture or the political economy. And I also really want to make this whole content creation YouTube thing a more important part of my life. life, and any kind of help would be super appreciated. Thank you guys, and let's go back to the video. So propaganda. Speed is Chinese propaganda apparently. Many other things are Chinese propaganda apparently. But what does propaganda even mean? And why is propaganda not the right word in the context of IShowSpeed's China trip? And in fact, we should rather use soft power. Let me try to explain. Traditionally, propaganda meant the attempt to transmit political and social values, which basically refers to the action of manipulating information or significant symbols in order to influence public opinion. And there's two types of propaganda. There's hard propaganda and also soft propaganda. Hard propaganda is what we usually think about when we say propaganda. It's basically fabricated news, super exaggerated pieces highlighting the most extreme best sides of a country, even if they're basically fake. It emotionally tries to mobilize you to be a bit more patriotic and love your country while painting your country's opponent as some kind of a devil or some kind of an enemy. And in the case of China, it's basically a tool for the government to legitimize itself and its own ruling and its social control over the country. For example, this is hard propaganda.
This is China, we love the culture with the children and the red dragon and the evil but a peaceful place, the beautiful land, rich culture.
And this doesn't really seem like propaganda to me that was designed by the government. So hard propaganda is one part of this tool that is used for social legitimation by the government. And the other one is soft propaganda or soft news. For me to describe what that is, we need to first talk about soft power. The term soft power was first coined by Joseph Nye, who's a Harvard professor, referring to the ability to influence others through persuasion and attraction instead of coercion and force. He obviously mainly applied this to countries, and the way how countries can attract others is through either their culture, their foreign policy, or their political values. And out of these, what's the most relevant here for our topic today is the cultural elements. What this means is that if a country is able to capitalize on its own culture and make it favorable and liked by others in the international community, then they will have much more leverage in global diplomacy in terms of swaying decisions in their own directions, not with its military or its huge economy, but because people like them. So when Speed goes to China and is able to show very cool elements of Chinese culture or just very good sides of China, it increases the positive attitudes towards China in the minds of foreign populations, which leads to China having more influence over international relations as well. And the reason why soft power is a relevant idea for China, beyond the fact that the government has invested a lot of money in wanting to strengthen their soft power, is that propaganda can contribute to soft power and can very much strengthen it. But not everything that generates soft power is propaganda. And we can't conflate the two ideas. Because if everything that creates some kind of a soft power for any country in this world are deemed as propaganda, then basically everything is propaganda in that case. And that would be quite ridiculous to say, which is why we can't really label Speed's China stream as propaganda. Just to give some examples, like the US is one of the biggest powers in this world with huge amounts of soft power, besides its big military industrial complex and like its big economy, but its soft power is massive. Even if you just think about like the big US brands like McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Apple, these are all different kind of things that create soft power for America. Or let's say Hollywood. The American film industry has been the biggest source of soft power and the reason why people think about the American dream and wanting to achieve the American dream even when they're not even American. And soft power is not only for big countries. For example, South Korea, if you just think about Parasite, Squid Game, Singles Inferno, these different kind of shows, also the huge industry behind K-drama, K-pop, or like Korean skincare, it's world renowned and there's a huge massive industry behind it. These are all elements of Korean soft power which would be quite weird to call as Korean propaganda. Even though the Korean government and also huge cultural industry firms had a massive contribution towards making Korean culture sexy, cool, and romanticized, something that international audiences would love as well. These cultural elements were all very meticulously designed and strategized in order to lift up the national economy of Korea. And the use of Korean culture to attract international audiences is not only used for boosting its own national economy, the Korean government is able to use its culture to attract different kind of international global diplomacy partners. So why is that not possible for China? Why is that when as soon as Speed steps into China, he becomes Chinese propaganda, while he wouldn't be called propaganda when he is anywhere else in the world? And this is where we finally reach soft propaganda and what that is. So we already know that China has a huge propaganda apparatus. And in this system, there's not only hard propaganda that being channeled, but also the concept of soft power is already built in, which is channeled through so-called soft news. Soft news has emerged as a new journalistic paradigm on social media, which basically encompasses all different kind of news that are for entertainment or virality purposes, that doesn't directly feed you government-sponsored ideas and thoughts, which channels propagandistic thoughts and messaging through seemingly innocent packaging. Just as how you channel your soft power towards foreign countries, you want to build a certain cultural messaging that will make your message more attractive to the audience itself. Soft news, for example, not necessarily talks about the Chinese government and the ruling party or whatever about the country itself, but it implicitly includes certain positioning and framing that subconsciously makes and creates a more positive idea of the country just by reading that piece of news. In a study conducted by 3 Chinese researchers called The Softening of Chinese Digital Propaganda, it was found that soft news is a gateway towards propaganda or accepting propaganda, which means that if you're watching and reading a lot of soft news, you will slowly have a more high likeliness of actually liking more of the propagandistic direct messaging. And these type of soft news messaging, both at home in China and also across the world, what makes it very hard for audiences to decide if a given piece of information or a given piece of digital media is actually propaganda or not. This is why the default setting for most people when they see content coming out of China or being about China is that it is straight up Chinese propaganda. And the existence of these type of soft news is what discredits China of having a stronger soft power. Alongside this, the Chinese side of the internet has been very, very separated from the West. We all know about the Chinese Great Firewall, which basically blocks majority of Western-led media channels such as Facebook, YouTube, Google, and they will have all their own local equivalents such as Weibo, Bilibili, Xiaohongshu, Douyin, etc., etc. This created an information gap between the West and China because there's a very strong filtration and censorship system within China. Voices from China doesn't come to the West that often. While on the other side, China has always been portrayed in a very negative light. There's been a very strong anti-China bias within traditional Western media due to the differences between political and social values. That's why even if there are certain voices that are positive about China that come out from China, usually Western audiences will just deem them as brainwashed because they can't believe that anyone had the right to say anything good about the country and not being forced to do so.
No matter what type of videos I share about China, there are always some people throwing around the word propaganda and then they just leaving.
And this information gap and lack of people-to-people interaction from the two sides has been probably one of the biggest reasons why we have such a little understanding of how China works and how China actually looks like. And even on the side of the Chinese population, that's why still, for many, many people, it's still kind of a mystique of how the Western world looks like. And I myself have also been to China. There's a lot of aspects about China that we don't really talk about or hear about, or don't even have like a realization, like an actual concept of in Western countries, because we never really got exposed to it and we never really seen it. And the only way you can see it is if you actually go there and experience it yourself. In case you want to see more of me being on the ground in China, I recently made a video on Chinese urbanization. Go check it out. But strangely, recently I've been seeing a shift within social media in terms of closing this gap of misunderstanding. More and more foreign content creators are going to China and trying to expose themselves to more of how China actually looks like and how people actually are within the country. And they're also trying to ungatekeep all the different kind of things that are being untold about China through their visit. And Speed is probably one of the most famous ones out of these influencers. There are also quite a few Chinese, I guess, influencers or just like meme materials that have been popping off within Western pop culture. They all create a newer idea of China with people who are funny, who are entertaining, being able to share their own thoughts and all their opinions, which again just changes the paradigm of how we have been thinking about China in the past decades. And even beyond content creators and influencers, there are some other instances as well when China gained clout globally. For example, the success of Black Myth Wukong, one of the most accomplished Chinese games ever. I have it as well, and it's a fucking fantastic game. And it's nothing politicized, nothing about the Chinese government. It's just Chinese culture, folklore, and it's a good standalone game in itself that people can enjoy without loving or hating Chinese political stances. Or let's just think about the recent TikTok ban in America. A lot of people from TikTok have fled towards a Chinese social media app, which is called Xiaohongshu, that is Red Note. And that's where a lot of people had the possibility of having people-to-people interactions, Chinese to American interactions, where people actually saw how the other is living on the other side of the ocean. And it was a beautiful cultural moment moment because finally people came together. Instead of listening to different kind of media channels or like government messaging, they actually just talked to each other and tried to have a better understanding of each other's cultures, each other's social situations. And of course, even with these big successes coming out of China, there's still going to be like propaganda accusations flying left and right. I will for certainly sure that I will be deemed as a CCP spy in one of the comments here. But going back to Speed, what he fundamentally did was contributing heavily to this growing wave of a cooler and more attractive image of China, and starting a very important discourse around if this gain in clout is actually because of just pure propaganda, or can there actually be soft power shaping cultural events that can actually give a real glimpse into a country without any kind of like background political motives. So this really just leads me to saying I don't think Speed was paid by the CCP. Like, look at this guy. I think he really just enjoys being a streamer. He's a young kid trying to entertain millions, enjoying his own fame. He's definitely not part of this like dark conspiracy network of things where he's like out there trying to, you know, promote China in the global diplomatic space. I don't think he's like a political mastermind. And seeing some messaging from his Chinese entourage, apparently most of the things that Speed was doing in China was planned within one day.
According to a Chinese staff member in Speed's entourage, most plans were made within just one day based on Speed's personal interests.
So all those interactions with those Chinese content creators, they probably have been quite an authentic interaction because those were not really planned at all. And obviously, I'm sure that Speed definitely had some guidelines on what things he cannot really do or what things to really avoid. But China is not like North Korea. Like, you can enter China and move around within China, and you don't have to be like babysat, be on like a very guided tour across the country. And that's why it wasn't even really important what Speed was saying throughout his stream. It's much more about what he was able to show. He was able to shine light on current Chinese pop culture and youth culture. He was able to show how many cities in China actually look like, how local people actually interact with each other or with him, and what type of genuine characters and fans will come around throughout the stream that he couldn't really plan for. He was able to show very raw human-to-human interactions that showed us all that even though there might be different kind of political views between governments, many countries in the world really just have very ordinary citizens just like you and me who are trying to live their life in where they are born. So he was really able to drive soft power for China without being a propaganda tool. And I'm sure the Chinese government was very, very happy to have him there because inadvertently his appearance definitely just drove very, very good soft power image for the country. And they didn't even have to touch any kind of like super heavy propaganda campaigns. They just needed to let this young kid do stupid shit. And that just shows a reality that China obviously has its own problems and its media is very much censored and governed and filtered. But when these type of honest interactions happen, the soft power that comes out of it should not be always criticized as some kind of propaganda and discredited fully, because what you discredit there is not necessarily just your stance against the Chinese government, but actually lived experiences of people who are in the country and know their own realities and don't need some kind of a mouthpiece to speak for them.
Personally, I don't think those videos are propaganda. First of all, they don't even show the best parts of China. They feature common things and some staged skits. Staged skits are not propaganda. Many influencers in China want to collaborate with Speed because of his popularity. As an influencer myself, I won't judge them for putting on a staged show like this, but those shows don't really showcase the best of China.
And honestly, in this age of like brain rot content and social media becoming more media than actually social, and us basically learning about the world much more through social media than any other kind of new channel nowadays, I'm glad to see that there are these huge, famous, influential people like IShowSpeed opening up their platform for more cultural dialogue. It kind of fulfills what the initial promise of the internet was, is the democratization of information. Speed stream and the growing interaction between Chinese and Western social media users have allowed a much more grassroots level people-to-people diplomacy, which helps building trust among citizens of nations from other cultures through very authentic interactions, and obviously strengthens country soft power but it also brings better cultural understanding among people. And well, is Speed the best person to like build cultural bridges between countries whose leaders are in like huge political tension? Well, depends. He definitely contributes to our current brain-rotty social media content that we have. But then again, that's what makes him relatable as a human being. When all the institutionalized media channels that we see are usually have some kind of a monetary backing or money interest behind them and some kind of a political ownership, it's quite refreshing to see someone who's just an ordinary guy who became famous because he barks at people and loves Cristiano Ronaldo, showing some kind of untold sides of a country that has been very demonized in that institutionalized media space, which can open up very important dialogue and conversation between China and the West to have a much better understanding of each other, and not only between governments, but the actual people who live in these countries, which is more and more crucial in our times of super extremes and polarization, to have some reconciliation between viewpoints and being able to find a common ground. And instead of fueling more hate, it just shows that sometimes we just need to talk to each other. Well, that's it for today. I hope you guys found this video insightful, or at least you learned something or just got entertained. Please, if you guys agree or disagree with me, put it down in the comments. I really want to know if you guys think if he's propaganda, is he not propaganda, is he paid, not paid? And please give a like to this video if you believe in culture exchange and more cultural understanding between people. And if you want to watch more videos like this, you know where the subscribe button is. Thank you for watching and see you guys in the next one. Peace!